Hello, my name is Nancy Martin, and today I picked to do my perspective project on inclusion. The topic of inclusion is very important and relevant to me as a future adapted special education teacher. I have spent many years working in all different types of classrooms. The past 4 summers I've worked in an adapted classroom for students with severe special needs. I currently am a long-term substitute teacher that collaborates in the general education classroom and pulls students out and into my special ed classroom. The articles take a stand on whether inclusion is valuable or has become too much. The first article we are going to look at is titled "The Value of Inclusive Education." I too agree that for the right students, inclusive education in the general education setting is very valuable. Some key notes from the article was that when all children, regardless of their differences, are educated together, everyone benefits. This is the cornerstone of inclusive education. Inclusive education means different and diverse students learning side by side in the same classroom. Education that excludes and segregates perpetuates discrimination against traditionally marginalized groups. When education is more inclusive, so are concepts of civic participation, employment, and community life. Separate special education provides no guarantee of success for children who need special attention. Inclusive schools that provide supportive, context-appropriate conditions for learning demonstrate far better outcomes. Basic elements include the use of teaching assistants and specialists, inclusive curriculum that has been adapted and accommodated for the student, and parental and community involvement. Governments also need to invest in teacher and staff training to improve infrastructure, learning materials, and equipment, and revising curricula to implement inclusive education successfully. However, by eliminating redundancy and the high cost of running parallel systems, such investments are an efficient and effective use of funds and hold the potential to improve education for all students. The second article we are going to look at is titled, "Has Inclusion Gone Too Far?" I too agree that for the right students, adapted education in the special education setting is very valuable and a much better fit for students with more severe needs. Some key notes from the article was that they found, unfortunately, research has yielded only weak evidence that inclusion confers benefits on SWDs, that means students with disabilities. Studies that report better academic and behavioral outcomes for SWDs who are taught in a general education setting suffer from methodological flaws. Even less evidence suggests that gen ed class teachers are adequately prepared to meet the unique academic and behavioral needs of students with disabilities. Further, studies of inclusion seem to assume that SWDs are educated in a vacuum. That is, they fail to examine the experiences of non-disabled classmates. The IDEA requires that students be educated in regular classrooms unless their academic and behavioral needs cannot be met in that setting, even with the use of supplemental aids and services. This ties into the least restrictive environment that we've been discussing. Other research suggests that students with disabilities will not be able to advance along grade level academic standards with the instruction typically provided in regular classrooms, even with the academics supports and accommodations. Students with higher academic abilities or fewer behavioral challenges are more likely to be placed in inclusive settings, while their peers who may have the same disability label but greater learning or behavioral needs are placed in special ed settings. The consistent findings that students with disabilities have better outcomes when educated in general education settings likely reflect this bias. Qualitative studies have found that general education teachers often do not have training or feel like they do not have the proper skills to meet the academic and behavioral needs of students with disabilities while also teaching their non-disabled peers. Students without disabilities have lower academic and behavioral outcomes when they are taught in classrooms that include students with disabilities, particularly students with an EBD and emotional behavioral disturbance. Overall, the article did enforce that inclusion is great, especially for activities like art and PE, but overall, if the student needs to be in a adapted special ed classroom, that is where they should be. Here you'll see I've made us a Venn diagram to explain the similarities and differences between the two articles we just learned about. So on the left, we have the value of inclusive education article. This was a great article for diversity. It was a more positive article talking about the good things with inclusion. It had lots of social benefits. It had more of a one-size-fits-all approach. It did not go into detail over how some students might not be able to fit into an inclusive classroom based on their physical or emotional or mental needs. It emphasized that here every child feels safe and included. Said that all students in that room are learning grade level material at the same pace with very little differences. And it had a lot of short and long-term societal benefits for all. Next, on the right, we're going to look at has inclusion gone too far and how it is different from the value of inclusive education. So in has inclusion gone too far, it provides lots of specific research was included. It included the possible negative effects to not only the student with disabilities, but also to the regular general education students and how having this inclusivity would distract and inhibit some of their learning. This article was much more realistic while still remaining positive. It included that many general education teachers are not quite qualified to teach students with more disabilities because that's not exactly what they were trained for. It also states that not everyone learns best in a gen ed education room. So in the middle, we have all the similarities between the two articles. Both articles adhere to LRE, least restrictive environment. Both articles said that teachers and assistants need proper training. Both articles want better social, academic, and long-term outcomes for all students, especially the students with disabilities. Both articles want all students to receive the best education possible. Both articles stated the vast need for more government involvement, whether that be money or resources. Both articles discuss that the students are determined by a case-by-case in IEPs. And lastly, it discussed that curriculum needs to be improved. Both sides can strongly agree that curriculum needs to be adjusted and improved to fit more students and to be more flexible. These articles will greatly influence my future teaching. Both emphasize the importance of understanding LRE, least restrictive environment, and how each student and their needs vary their location of education. I loved getting to read both sides of this perspective. This has taught me the benefits and pitfalls of both inclusion and adapted classrooms. The articles also highlighted how strong of a need there is for a change in curriculum. It is key that we need to make curriculum more accessible and better accommodated for all of our students, let alone our students with disabilities. Lastly, this taught me that the parent and staff involvement always plays a huge role in education. This means more than just attending the IEP meeting. This is involvement in and outside of the classroom. And that concludes today's project on inclusion. Here are my citations for each of the articles. Thank you all so much for listening. I hope this helped shine a light on both sides and how we as future educators need to do our best to help each student with their particular needs.